What's up everybody, this is the 2021 BMW X3 xDrive30i, and in this video I'm going to cover the exterior, the interior, take it for a drive and see what it's like out on the road, as well as talking about the kind of fuel economy you can expect and also the pricing and how it compares to the competition these days. And so I also want to give a huge thank you to Harrison Auto Sales and Service for providing me here with this vehicle to review for you guys today. So as far as the styling here on the X3, well, I think that, this vehicle's been around for about 5-6 years now. It just got replaced here for the 2025 model year of the X3, and this 2021 was the last year before the refresh that they got, where they got some slightly sharper headlights, a slightly larger screen inside, and a few other little tweaks. But the 2021s here are still a really attractive looking vehicle. I love how this is kind of the final remnants of the angel eye headlights you have up front here on this and many other BMWs, and they are LED headlights there. And I also always thought that the X3, even though it wasn't the most bold styling in its segment, it is aged very well. And I think many years later here, it still is an attractive looking vehicle. It doesn't try and stand out from the crowd, but still looks very nice nonetheless. I also like the little faux skid plate you have on the front and on the back, and even a little bit of silver trim on the sides kind of spruces it up a little bit, makes it look pretty nice. You also on this one have these 18-inch wheels, because this is just a regular X3. You could get the M Sport packages and also full-blown M40i and X3M versions of this if you wanted a sportier look and a lot more performance as well. But really nice there. Also like the little side vent you have here in the fenders, and a nice side profile here, a nice roof rack, and window trim being bright work is a nice touch. And then going out to the back there, I always thought it was, again, just nice and attractive looking, nothing wild, but some nice traditional BMW taillights. I do like the dual exhaust tips you have there that are nicely polished, and again, that little bit of a faux skid plate on the back there. And overall, again, this isn't going to stand out in a parking lot, but it's also going to blend in very nicely. And for some people, that's what they're going for. They just want something that gets them around, with a nice looking package that's comfortable and smooth driving, and I think the X3 very much delivers on that. The interior of the 2021 X3 is a very nice place to be. It's actually really impressive. This one also is very nicely spec'd with, these caramel color leather seats, and, the nice open pore wood grain, but I believe it's actually plastic, but a very nice decor, and, all the metal plated buttons and switches and knobs. It's all very impressive, honestly, and I do think it is a little more special feeling than a lot of the other competitors. And so anyway, first thing, seeing that in these seats, one thing I love about these is that they come with 10-way power adjustable seats as standard, even in a base X3, which is unusual. Usually the Germans don't give you much for free with, the base models, but this is really impressive. So that means that you have all your usual adjustments, as well as, adjustable lumbar and adjustable bolstering, which is really rare, again, even in regular vehicles to have that. And so that means that, if you're on the smaller side, these seats can hug you in nice and tight if you want them to, or you can have them as wide as you want. And they're actually pretty soft, comfortable seats, and, a nice amount of bolstering, of course. They also have the adjustable thigh extension as well, and these ones are heated. I don't believe you can get cooled seats on these, but this one just has the heat, and still really nice. And then moving on to the steering wheel here, it's a really nice leather wrapped wheel, has a nice little 10 and 2 notch area here, and yeah, great 9 and 3 grip. Just a few buttons here on it, nice and simple though. It didn't have a million things. Like this one doesn't have adaptive cruise control, so you don't have those extra buttons. A little bit of a simpler setup as far as that goes. It is a heated steering wheel though, which I believe was an option, and you also do have the paddle shifters here on the back of the wheel that are very nice looking and great feeling too. Moving on to the gauge cluster here. So by 2021, I believe you have this fully digital cluster as standard. It's about a 10.25-inch display, and it's really nice and high resolution. I always really enjoyed this screen and other BMWs. On the right-hand side there, you do have a little bit of an adjustability with, showing gauges, showing your media information, which I always thought was cool, the way they integrated the album art in there into the background. Nice and simple, clear gauges though, and really well done. It was also an option to get a head-up display in these back in 2021. This one does not have that option, but just know you can get these with a head-up display if you look for one that has that. And then coming over to the middle of the dashboard, you have another 10.25 inch display right up top here, and it's a touchscreen display, which is great, but you still do have the controller knob. So if you don't want to get fingerprints on the screen, or you just prefer, the old school approach of using a little controller knob here from BMW, you still have that option. I love that they gave people both options. And as far as the screen goes, it does have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Android Auto and satellite radio both were new standard features for 2021. So just one thing to note about the 21s in particular here. But everything is so quick and snappy. And, even here filming this in 2025, it hasn't felt slow. And honestly, it still feels faster than many other vehicles in 2025 with their infotainment systems. I mean, super snappy with all the responses. Maps is all nice and easy. Navigating through everything's simple. And it just gives you the basics you need and nothing you don't. And a really nicely done screen, honestly. And then coming down, you have this final year of climate control knobs. 2022 X3's got rid of the climate control knobs. You still had a volume knob, but the climate were now rocker switches on the 2022s. So 2021 here, possibly the last in high watermark for the X3s here. And it really is nice having the knobs here for changing your climate, because you can just reach out and grab them without having to figure out what button you're pressing. I mean, it's nice to have buttons, because that is also something that is vanishing from modern BMWs. So buttons are nice too in the 2022 to 2024s, but great to have the knobs here, I think. And I also love, the little row of customizable buttons with 1 through 7 there, being a really nice, kind of historical touch for BMWs, and actually very usable and functional as well. Moving on to the storage spaces here in the X3, it's pretty good. Typical, compact crossover fashion. So in the doors here, you do have some nice large bottle holders. They are larger than average, I'd say. Really usable there. And then in the middle here, you have this little cover, and you push that back, and you'll see another little storage space next to a USB-A jack. There was an option to get a wireless charging pad in 2021. This one does not have that. But just know, I believe that's where that would go. And then you have your 2 cup holders and a regular power outlet in there. And then you also have, your shifter area with just a few buttons there for your drive modes. And again, that controller knob. And then you have the center armrest, which is a little bit on the firm side, but still nice and softly padded. And you open that up and you'll see a fairly shallow area. I think some of the competing vehicles might have a slightly bigger area in here. But it does have a USB-C jack for charging, which is cool, because a lot of other vehicles didn't switch over to USB-C jacks until just a year or two ago. And so back in 2021, we had one here. We also have 2 in the backseat as well. So a total of 3 USB-C jacks in this vehicle, which is very nice. But yeah, so up front here, just a very nice interior. And again, even the window switches, again, being metal plated, the door handle being cool to the touch here, all these buttons being cool to the touch. It's real metal plating. Very impressive. And, compared to, the Audis in particular, and even some of the other, competing things from Lexus and Acura, this is really top notch. I think really the only one that kind of rivals it is the Mercedes GLC. And honestly, I think I prefer this interior slightly over the GLC in some ways. And anyway, so very nice up front here. Moving on to the back seat here in the X3. It's a nice back seat as well. Good amount of space there. There are also standard reclining seats in the back, which is a really cool touch. And I'm 5'9", me sitting behind myself. I easily have about 4 inches of legroom to spare. So pretty nice and roomy for adults. And headroom is pretty good. And you also, in this one, the way it's optioned to have the tri-zone climate. I don't believe that was standard, but you do have that here. They also have their own dedicated air vents when you look forward. And again, there's USB-C jacks. There's also a full down center armrest there with 2 cup holders built into it. And yeah, just a really nice back seat. And the other really nice perk, this one is optioned with this huge panoramic moonroof. And even again, in modern vehicles, 2025, some of them, in this segment have smaller moonroofs than this. It really goes super far back and gives you a really expansive view. And that is very impressive. And it also does open up too. You have the front portion here that can open up, and really a very nice moonroof, a very nice option if you can find it out there on the used market. Moving on to the cargo space here in the X3, it's a really good amount of space, very boxy, so very nice and wide, nice and tall, and nice and flat. And You also see like a built-in little grocery hooks, which are always an appreciated touch in my book. And, you know, just a good amount of space. There's also a little bit of bonus space under the floor there where you'll see a little alcove to, you know, stash a couple more things. But, yeah, overall, you know, very practical vehicle, of course, being an SUV. And I think as far as the numbers go, this is one of the best in its segment. I don't think it's the best, but it is, you know, a very nice large space back there. And so overall, yeah, a very nice interior here in the 2021 X3. But let's start up and go for a drive. The X3s here in 2021 still had traditional BMW key here, which is a nice key. I like the rounded edges there, and you know, pretty thin and not too big or anything, and I just really like it. So of course it is keyless access, keyless entry and push button start. I believe that was standard by this point in time. And so anyways, leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button, and it starts right up. All right, so setting off here in the 2021 X3. So the first thing you notice about it, well, I think the first thing that I'm noticing is that it's a really smooth ride. Obviously, everything in this segment rides pretty nicely, but I think this ride is a little softer than the GLC from my memory. And is a little softer maybe than even some of the others as well. I don't know if it's the softest in the segment, but it is just so comfortable and, you know, very quiet in here, of course, in typical BMW fashion. You know, it feels very much like a luxury car and has that solid quality about it. Now, other things to notice. So you have a nice and responsive throttle that, you know, nice and smooth with the ramp up, very easy to be smooth with that. Brakes are the typical BMW touchy brakes where it takes a little bit of extra finesse. It's something you definitely learn, you get the muscle memory for, and you learn to not be super aggressive with your brake inputs. But it's just a unique BMW thing, the way they tune their brakes, where, you know, it just takes a little bit of practice to be super smooth with them. But that means they're very responsive feeling, though, and they do have a nice initial bite to them, if that's something that you appreciate. Other things here, so you have really good visibility in the X3. Obviously, you're sitting up high, and so that certainly helps. The only thing I don't love, though, is the fact that you do have kind of a chunky A-pillar area. Between the A-pillar itself is kind of curved, so it actually isn't too obstructive, but then you have this huge speaker right at the base of the A-pillar that seems a little overboard for the area, honestly, and you know, not a huge deal, but I can see in certain instances where that may end up getting in the way. You also have some slightly smaller side mirrors. It's not terrible, and thankfully you do have blind spot monitoring as standard here in 2021. That was a new standard feature, along with lane departure warning being a standard thing as well. But, you know, just a little bit of a smaller mirror than all the other competitors, and that was, again, just something where BMW chose to do, you know, the style component over the functional aspect of it. And, you know, again, I think it's something you can also still get used to very easily. View out of the back is also pretty good in typical SUV fashion. Also, the steering is a nice weight, too. So, you know, it's got a little bit of heft to it and has some nice feedback. And this is where I think, you know, BMW's tuning and a little bit of a sportier vibe sometimes to their models certainly pays off, because I think this steering feels a little better, a little more connected than a lot of the other competitors. And I think, you know, maybe even a tiny bit heavier than some of the other competitors, which I personally like. It's not overboard. It's not like, you know, it's an arm workout to turn the steering wheel or anything. Obviously, they sell tons of these. They know they have to have mass appeal. But, you know, it just, again, feels a little sportier and goes along with their marketing of, you know, these being the ultimate driving machines. You know, X3 isn't really gunning for that title, I don't think, but, you know, it's, you know, just it feels a little nicer. And as an enthusiast, I do appreciate the little bit more feedback I think you get through all the controls. And as we're just pulling out onto a little back road here, just casually driving for now, you know, it's also really quiet for the engine. I was kind of surprised just how little of the engine I hear, honestly. Obviously, in a vehicle like this, you're not supposed to really hear the engine a whole lot, again, to bring you that luxury car kind of experience. But some of the other stuff in this segment, especially the Mercedes GLC, you hear the engine a lot more than you hear this one. And yeah, I actually think this may be one of the quietest engines in the segment. Very, very impressive as far as that goes too. And also this transmission, we have a ZF 8-speed automatic transmission here in these, one of the best transmissions in the industry, honestly. BMW uses it across most of their vehicles. And it's very smooth, but again, very responsive, and is always in the right gear, very well programmed, and just, you know, really nice transmission. And, you know, so no complaints as far as that goes. Everything about this is so smooth. smooth. And, you know, again, if you aren't trying to drive in a sporting manner, it's great because it just kind of all falls into the background. You just focus on your drive, you focus on your entertainment, whatever, and the car nicely kind of fades into the background there. But I'm going to go ahead and put it up into the sport mode, which does give you a little bit more of a dynamic setting. There's also an individual mode where you can tweak steering, throttle, and all that, you know, to be exactly how you want it to be. But sport mode kind of makes everything a little bit sporty. We also have a slightly different gauge cluster appearance here in the sport mode. But let's turn down onto this back road here and see how it does. And here we go. Pretty responsive with the downshift, and it gets up and goes very nicely, very smooth. So we have the B48 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine here that BMW again deploys across many models and is, you know, a really staple powertrain in their lineup here. And so it does in this application 248 horsepower, 258 pound-feet of torque, and the 0-60 time for these is going to be about 6.2 seconds, as I believe what Car and Driver got. And that is a little bit on the slow side compared to some of the other competitors. Even like a regular Audi Q5 will do a mid 5-second time, and some of the best stuff in this segment does low 5 seconds, like the Alfa Romeo Stelvio and also the Acura RDX, which have a little bit more horsepower to them. Those that will feel a little punchier than this. Again, I guess it comes down to how badly you want the power. I mean, you're only talking a second slower, 0-60 or something, not a huge deal. But just know this isn't the straight line king. Now, if you want more power, there's lots of options here. There's the M40i version with, I think, about 382 horsepower. There's also going to be the full-blown X3M, and that does like 473 horsepower in its regular version. And then there's also an extra fast competition version with 503 horsepower. Those are going to be the way to go, obviously, if you want to have the sportiest thing. And actually, the M40i is a very nice balance. It's still very comfortable. I reviewed one of those several years ago, actually, back when they were new. And I was really impressed with it because it still was so, again, comfort-oriented, still didn't beat you up. It didn't feel overly sporty, but just had a great-sounding engine with a 6-cylinder you got in that one. And then also just having, you know, still a very dynamic handling vehicle, and, you know, that extra punch you might be missing here in this. There's also a plug-in hybrid version of these that's available too, if you want to get better fuel efficiency there. That gives you 18 miles of electric range. One of the, you know, earliest plug-in hybrids. These days they do more range, but 18 miles is still better than nothing. And you know, a nice option there as well. And that does also give you more punch in that version too, in addition to that extra efficiency. And I'm going to try out some manual shifts here in the X3. Yeah, it's instant in typical ZF fashion. So good. You also just have the regular S mode for the transmission, so I didn't even put it into for my first acceleration. That'll give you, you know, even sportier shifts here. But we'll just leave it in that mode now and let it do the automatic shifting on its own. But as far as the handling, now that we are on a little bit of a windy back road here, handling is really, really good. It, you know, feels just as good as the 3 Series, honestly. Just you're sitting up a little higher, maybe a little bit more curb weight. These weigh just around 4,300 pounds, but it is really impressive. And I think, you know, the rear-wheel drive-based platform you have in the X3 really pays dividends here. Now, this isn't the only vehicle in this segment that does, you know, have the rear-wheel drive-based thing. We do also have that in, you know, many of the other competitors like the GLC and even the Alfa Romeo Stelvio. But, you know, compared to like the Audi Q5, which I reviewed a 2021 model back when those were new, this certainly feels a little sportier with the handling, and especially this one, you know, being all-wheel drive certainly helps. It is worth noting, though, you can get these with rear-wheel drive. They're called the xDrive30i versions, and so if you live in a place where you don't need all-wheel drive, you know, you can make do just fine with that. But yeah, this thing is, it's actually very dynamic. I don't know how many people are really pushing their, you know, base X3s a whole lot, but it keeps up. And if you are in a hurry, or, you know, just rushing somewhere, something like that, or you find yourself on a back road and you want to, you know, go a little quickly, this will keep up very nicely. And I'm pleasantly surprised. You know, the more mundane looks of the X3 don't really, you know, do it any favors as far as, you know, hinting at what the potential of this thing is. It actually is a very competent handler and a very nice driving vehicle on a back road for sure. And if you want to have even more sportiness in your X3, you're able to get these with adaptive dampers. They were an extra cost option, but you know, you were able to get that if that's something you're interested in. And also there's a dynamic handling package, which bundled in those adaptive dampers with a variable steering ratio and also some M Sport brakes, so a little bit extra braking power, and I believe also some sportier looking wheels on those as well. Speaking of the wheels, these 18s just have 225 wide tires all around. This one just has, of course, the regular all seasons. I believe, again, you were able to get like a summer tire option if you really wanted to, have something sportier. But, these all seasons, do a fine job here. And, again, no one's taking their regular X3 to the racetrack. So I think, the all seasons are completely fine. There's a lot of sporty all seasons. If you want a little more grip, very easy to go buy a new set of tires and get, a big upgrade in handling, I think, even just with that. While we're comparing, I guess I have to say, this is towards the upper mid-pack as far as handling, in my opinion, if you care about that stuff. I won't dwell on this very long because I don't know how many X3 buyers actually care, but I will say Stelvio, Alfa Romeo Stelvio, is still hands down the best handler in this segment, followed by Acura RDX with the super handling all-wheel drive, which gives you real, true torque vectoring where it overdrives the inside rear wheel, makes those very dynamic. Those are my top two in this segment as far as handling for regular stuff. Those are also the punchiest two in the segment, I believe. But, I'd say this is probably right underneath that RDX there. Does feel better than a GLC to me, while, still having a more comfortable ride and better handling, kind of the best of all the worlds there. Q5 is, a little bit more on the comfort side, I'd say, although, it still is perfectly fine in the handling department. And then, so the last couple of little things I mentioned here is the safety technology, the fuel economy, and then the pricing and how it compares to the competition these days. So first off, as far as the safety technology goes, one thing for 2021 was that, again, they made the lane departure warning a standard feature, but at this point in time, you still had to pay extra for adaptive cruise control. They have eventually added that in as a standard thing here in modern X3s, and I believe they added that at some point along the way here for this generation, but 2021, you didn't get that as standard, so that's the only thing you got to keep in mind. And otherwise, though, you do have, again, blind spot monitoring was standard in 2021, which is great. And it's also worth noting you can customize these safety systems, so if you don't want to have the lane departure warning, which thankfully is just a steering wheel vibration, it doesn't do any audible alerts, so it's not too annoying and just kind of gives you that little nudge of like, okay. And it's also a quiet vibration. Other vehicles that do vibrating steering wheels sometimes are really loud. You can hear the buzzer going off, and your passengers would also perceive that, like, oh, the car's telling me screwing up. This, it kind of lets you know without letting the entire car know that you are having a little bit of steering assistance there that's required. We also have an automatic emergency braking that was standard too here, and a few other things, but all the basics for the most part. And again, you could get these with adaptive cruise. You just have to find one that has that option configured, if they're on the used market. And then as far as fuel economy goes here for these are rated at 23 mpg in the city, 29 on the highway, and 25 combined. And that's all pretty much the same. All these things are powered by a 2-liter 4-cylinder turbo motor. And so nothing really out of the ordinary there. I do think, though, the BMW motors sometimes overperform their estimates, much like how the motors themselves with horsepower sometimes overperform. And so you might be able to get even better fuel economy than that potentially, but that's what they're rated at here. And if you are, again, interested in better efficiency, one, you can go for the xDrive version, which is rear-wheel drive. That gives you 2 mpg better in the city, and also 2 better mpg combined. And again, also you have that plug-in hybrid version, which can give you 18 miles of all-electric range before you have to even use the gas engine. So great that they had those options in such a diverse powertrain menu there for people to pick from, so you can have exactly what you want there. And so yeah, as far as pricing, though, and how these compare to the competition these days. So this one, as tested at Harrison Auto Sales here, is just over $28,000 at the time of me filming this here. And that's about what these go for. Some of the ones with slightly higher miles, a little bit more beat up, can get a little bit lower. But if you want a nice one like this, all the nice options this one has on it, you're going to be paying, about between $28,000 and $30,000 there. And if you're interested in this X3 in particular, Harrison Auto Sales has it available. Definitely check out the link in the description there to take you straight to that site. Give them a call. They'd be more than happy to help you out if you are interested in this vehicle in particular. But as far as how this compares to the competition, it's kind of funny. I just checked today, and this is almost identical. The pricing of all of these, they've all kind of depreciated to be an equal level, regardless of where they all started at. And it's kind of funny how every single thing in this segment, for the most part, with a couple exceptions I'll get to in a second, but Most of them are all like, you know, $25,000 to $30,000 for the most part, with comparable miles, comparable stuff. And so it means that it kind of puts all of these on level footing. So whether we're talking X3, or we're talking Q5, or we're talking GLC, or we're talking NX, or we're talking Jaguar F-Pace, or we're talking XC60 from Volvo, all of those are in the same exact price range. And again, this is a very packed segment, so I'm not going to go through the pros and cons of each of them. You know, the only thing I'll mention is that, like, the NX is definitely going to be the best one from a reliability standpoint. Lexus is famous for their reliability and their, you know, lower cost of ownership compared to you know, many of the other competitors. And that's also one other thing to mention with the BMW in particular. You have a 4-year, 50,000 mile bumper to bumper and powertrain warranty. And the powertrain warranty is a little lower. I feel like there's some others that will get you up to about 60,000 and, you know, 5 years of coverage for that. So just keep in mind, if you're shopping these on the used market, again, if you're under 50,000 miles in 4 years, you will still have some balance of the manufacturer warranty left, but you know, it kind of runs out a little sooner than some of the others. And that is one area where nothing really beats this, unless you want to go for the Genesis GV70, which I believe is slightly more expensive and, you know, a little bit newer. I don't believe they started making those till, I think, 2022. But, you know, if you aren't planning on keeping one of these a long time, you know, even still, it's just worth noting that, you know, the German vehicles sometimes do have, you know, little electrical gremlins that pop up. Now, the B48 motor in this vehicle, in the X3, is pretty famous for being a very solid motor that is very well built and all that. So I wouldn't worry about mechanical stuff necessarily. It's just that, you know, sometimes you get those little electrical gremlins and things like that that require a visit to the dealer. So, you know, I always recommend an extended warranty on, especially in the European stuff, you know, versus the, I believe, you know, with the Lexus, I wouldn't worry about that too much, or even the Acura for that matter. Now, the one vehicle that is, I think, a better value than all the others, that kind of has depreciated a little more aggressively, honestly, is the Alfa Romeo Stelvio. Now, Alfa Romeo, obviously not for everybody, you know, a little bit more of a more Spartan interior, not quite as luxurious as this in my opinion, not quite as well executed either. The touchscreen in that, which came in the later model years, wasn't the best. The controller thing was fine, but, you know, it's a second-rate infotainment system compared to this, in my opinion, and I think most people would agree. You know, so there's a few compromises there, but Stelvio, again, best handling one, best accelerating one, I believe, in the pack. I still think it has pretty nice looks even today, and I actually really love the Stelvio. And if you're looking for a bargain, those are, it seems, between about $3,000 to $5,000 less expensive. Again, comparable miles, comparable model year, all that stuff. So that's really the bargain, and especially if you're an enthusiast, I would recommend the Stelvio for sure, because the handling is really impressive, and you have like giant metal paddle shifters if you get one of the sportier trims, and it's a very impressive vehicle. So I think the Stelvio doesn't get enough love. Alfa Romeo sometimes, you know, has their own reliability complaints, but honestly, when you look at the Carfaxes on a lot of these old Stelvios, most of them are pretty uneventful and are really good. So I think Stelvio isn't to be slept on, especially if you're an enthusiast. If you don't care about the sporty stuff, you know, I also think the Acura RDX is a really solid value as well. Those are about the same price as this, but you have a little bit more space in the RDX, a little bit of a longer cargo area, a little bit more back seat space. Now that doesn't have the touchscreen, unfortunately. That has a weird little controller pad that Acura uses. I've gotten used to it though over the many years that I've you know, tried them out, but I also just, again, love the handling of the RDX, but it's also just a little more roomy feeling and a little more substantial, you know, as far as the size of it. And so for that reason, I think RDX is another really great value that, again, is the same price. If safety is your number one concern, the XC60 is probably gonna be the best way to go as far as that goes, although many of these vehicles are very, very safe. I think most of them honestly are, especially the luxury vehicles. But Volvo obviously is always very famous and very you know, well known for their safety and their focus on that. So, you know, that's the other thing I'll mention as far as, you know, that is equal to this. But also there have been, I think, a few more reports of powertrain issues in the XC60 compared to this. So, you know, might be a trade-off there of, you know, maybe a little bit less reliability in the Volvo in exchange for the better safety. So all comes down to personal preference as far as that goes. But anyway, that's all of my thoughts here on the X3 and its competitors and how it, you know, lands these days. I think overall, the bottom line with the X3 is it's, you know, a very nice one to fly under the radar with. That still gives you top-notch driving dynamics, a really nice, luxurious interior. I think, again, really top of the pack as far as comfort goes. And you know, it's just a really likable choice that, again, because of the solid mechanicals here of these, again, the 2021s in particular, having the volume knob and also the climate control knobs, the screen that's not overboard, again, really kind of, I think, a Goldilocks kind of happy medium of, you know, you have all the technology you need, but not overboard like I think some people feel about with all these screen heavy vehicles from BMW and basically everybody else these days. And if that's you, then, you know, find a nice one of these like this one with all these nice options on it, and you're going to be very happy. You still have your smartphone integration that'll future-proof you for a long time too, and you got a vehicle that should still last a nice long while. So anyway, that's all of my thoughts here on the 2021 X3. Let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below. Huge thanks once again to Harrison Auto Sales and Service for providing me here with this vehicle to review for you guys today. Yeah, thank you all very much for watching. Let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.